Hey, hi, and hello, everyone. Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. I hope you're doing well. It's time for a reaction to a classic review that I did. It'll be this fall that this coverage that I did of Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, M.A.A.d City, one of my most popular videos on my main channel, will be 10 years old, a whole decade old. Look at me back then, smiling with my rectangle glasses, looking young, looking fresh, looking excited, wearing the Death Grip shirt that don't fit me no more. Yes, I mean, while I loved this record at the time, I still love this record to this day. I want to go over my original thoughts on it and just kind of see how they may have evolved over the years. I want to see if this review still, like, you know, stands up to criticism. Does this criticism stand up to my criticism 10 years down the road? To be honest, like, I remember that I loved the LP, obviously, remember that I gave it a 9, but I don't remember a lot of what I brought up or mentioned in my process here. So it'll be interesting, again, going over this. I'm looking at my records. I'm already seeing, like, the binders of a few albums that I don't own anymore. I think I may have sold at some point, so that's given me some nostalgic feels. This video was also shot in my old apartment too, that was depicted in the Death Grips Money Store video, though I had decided upon a different orientation of, like, the camera and the shelf at this point. Nailed it, and you know, since I nailed it, I have stuck with it. Don't know what I'm laughing about off the bat here, but let's look at this giggly review. I will say I'm very surprised that my coverage of this album was just 11 minutes and 37 seconds. That is it. That's it for the review. I feel like a 2015, 2016 Anthony would have easily done a 20-minute review on this record. I feel like I have more than 11 minutes of material on this record at this point.
Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here. Thank you for watching. Internet's busiest music nerd.
Hey, he's right. Thank you for watching.
And it's time for a review. Kendrick Lamar, Good Kid, M.A.A.d City. This dude is a Compton rapper. This is his sophomore full-length album, the follow-up to last year's Section 80, which is one of my favorite hip-hop albums of 2011. And it's a conscious hip-hop album that does not sacrifice great flows, production, catchy hooks, stellar wordplay, and personality in the process of developing a very relevant and socially aware message. And it does this through a series of short stories in the track's lyrics that kind of come together thematically by the end of the album. Though Kendrick has a lot of great qualities as a rapper, what I thought was so awesome about Section 80 is how conceptual the album was. And that was a characteristic about him and his music that I just was hoping he would not let go of as he kind of went into later albums.
So far, I will say I don't have a whole lot to add. I haven't jumped into, like, you know, the meat of the review yet in terms of Good Kid, M.A.A.d City, but as far as, like, the lead up, explaining my feelings on the last record, explaining sort of what I was hoping for, what I was anticipating for the new record, not only am I fine with this still to this day, but this is, like, very much still how I format a lot of the reviews now.
And I'm actually really happy to say that being conceptual is one of the artistic personality traits of Kendrick that has gotten stronger. There are a good handful of tracks from this album that had been released before the release of this LP, including Swimming Pools, Backseat Freestyle, Compton, The Art of Peer Pressure as well, but none of it really makes total sense until the entire album's being listened to from beginning to end, just kind of standing back, getting a glimpse at the bigger picture of things.
This is true, and a lot of people totally have erased this from their fucking memories, that not every single in the lead up to Good Kid, M.A.A.d City was super well received, especially, like, you know, stuff such as Backseat Freestyle, where I think some fans kind of, like, you know, were almost like losing faith, like, oh no, it's not like a conscious song, da-da-da-da-da. But it's like, it's not until you hear the whole record that you realize all these songs are a part of a story. Some of the reception in the lead up was a little mixed, but only because fans didn't have the full picture yet. And honestly, like, to be a part of that moment and be a part of an audience that didn't necessarily expect this level of narrative and conceptuality from Kendrick was really something special. Because now, like, even if you're a newer fan of Kendrick Lamar, his talent and his pedigree, his MO is so well established. No matter what he does, you're going to go into a new Kendrick project looking for some kind of huge overarching concept that pulls everything together, some kind of, narrative. Is it obvious? Is it esoteric? Is it secret? Is it lurking in the shadows? Again, in retrospect, it was really something to go into this LP just not expecting this level of storytelling and being totally taken aback by it, because, you were just kind of off your guard and just blown away by the effort and the detail that was put into this thing.
As far as lyrics on this LP go, they're just on point, track after track after track. None of the flows really feel elementary or anything like that. And though some songs may feel a little more shallow on the surface than others, it may depend on the kind of character that Kendrick is playing on the song. For example, the track Backseat Freestyle, you've got Kendrick kind of rapping very braggadociously over this banger beat about his growing as big as the Eiffel Tower. It is just completely over the top, ridiculous. If you're familiar with this kid's music, it's just really out of character for him. But if you look into the voicemail messages occurring after and before the track and the music that comes before and after the track, it becomes apparent that Kendrick right now is in the backseat of a car, chilling with his friends, just kind of being as loud and obnoxious as they are, as they're all hanging out together. Right after Backseat Freestyle, you get the track The Art of Peer Pressure, which is kind of like an internal monologue with Kendrick where, yeah, he's hanging out with his friends and he's having, this good time on the outside. But in fact, he's kind of doing all this stuff that is out of character for him, whether it be doing drugs, running up on people, robbing houses, things he wouldn't normally find himself doing if he wasn't hanging out with people who see themselves successfully living this gangster lifestyle.
I don't really take issue with anything that I'm saying here in the general sense, but maybe that's the problem. It's a little too general in a way. I think in retrospect, I would have liked to have gone back and spoke about like what exactly makes Kendrick's flows, his lyrics so good on these tracks in terms of like the scenarios, the settings that he's describing and painting, and what makes the production hit so hard as well. I mean, obviously, again, I'm kind of explaining the point of the tracks in a macro sense, but there are so many great, amazing, finer, nuanced micro details to this LP as well that I'm not diving into as closely as I could at this point anyway. I also think like I would have had better wording if I had more experience and more understanding of the ways in which things like stereotypes and systematic racism and poverty, like, also play in a larger sense into a lot of what, is happening on this LP conceptually.
Good Kid, M.A.A.d City is pretty much a story of love, lust, violence, the violence that you're surrounded with kind of sucking you in, the violence you're surrounded with tearing your family apart, and finally the realization of where a violent path can kind of bring you in life, which is where a song like Real comes in toward the end of this LP. And pretty much every track on this album adds to that narrative. Like the track Poetic Justice, which is kind of like a love song. Kendrick sees himself in like this love fantasy with this girl that's mentioned toward the beginning of the album, Shireen. But at the end of the track, Kendrick ends up getting jumped by two cousins of hers. At that moment, Kendrick kind of sees himself violently snap back into a harsh reality after seeing, hey, like living this life isn't really so bad. Things are going pretty well. I'm in love. I see money coming my way, which is kind of another fantasy Kendrick sees himself in the midst of on the track Money Trees right before Poetic Justice.
Obviously, it was necessary to add this in text. I wish I said this more explicitly. It's funny. I'm talking a lot at this point in the review, and I do tend to talk. I can be very long-winded, but I feel like I'm saying a lot, but I'm not getting to the point as succinctly as I possibly could. And still to this day, I have an issue with this. But the point being, like, Kendrick is laying out very clearly a two-path option here. I could continue living in this fantasy that is intoxicating, risky, most likely will lead to a bad outcome. Those bad outcomes are very much spelled out blatantly and boldly through the death of friends toward the end of the LP. I could continue on this path, or I could opt for something better.
After these two songs, it's two of the grittiest tracks on this entire LP, Good Kid and Mad City, that become really sobering. The first of which, Kendrick is talking about the death of his uncle. He's talking about racial profiling for police officers. And the track Mad City takes a look at that same violence, but from more of a retrospective angle, with Kendrick kind of rapping about a younger version of himself. And on that track, he actually takes a completely different inflection with his voice, rapping where his voice is cracking like this, whether it's from emotion or maybe even puberty if he's trying to be a younger version of himself. Either way, it's just really chilling.
This is actually something that before I started watching this, I knew has kind of dogged me a little bit about this video. I'm not doing enough to praise Kendrick's technical skill and ability as a rapper. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean it in the sense that, oh, he's just like got such amazing rhythm and, you know, really cool inventive flow ideas. No, I mean, his ability to capture a certain mood with a voice and a delivery and a certain kind of inflection really enhances. I mean, just imagine this record of Kendrick kind of flatly in a monotone way just delivered every single one of these verses. He wouldn't transport you to a different time, place, mentality in the way that he does, if not for his ability to switch up his inflections so boldly and so wildly that he sounds like, you know, several different people across this record. You know, it's not just his ability to write down a story, but deliver it to you in a way where it just instantaneously brings you to a time, a place, a frame of mind for him.
You do get some self-aware spots on this album where you have Kendrick kind of rapping about his current self outside of this storyline, like Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe, where he's kind of rapping about his fame and sort of where he sees his artistic vision going as he gets more attention on his music, and sort of how his message is ultimately what's going to be most important to him. And the song Sing About Me is really one of the most interesting songs I've ever heard, where a rapper is literally writing about his art and his career in such a way where it's impacting the people who listen to it or the people he raps about. I mean, he literally does verses on this song referencing people who kind of were inspirations for music on this album and his previous LP too. In a way, the song is kind of like another layer of narrative to this album itself. It's kind of like an epilogue in a way. Now, as far as the production goes on this LP, it is sonically inconsistent, but I do think overall it's great. But the reason I say sonically inconsistent is that, you know, the sounds on this LP change up as much as the scenes and just sort of the moods of these tracks do. You know, the sounds most definitely fit the story Kendrick is trying to tell or where he is in the progression of this tale. The opening track, Shireen, is just really nocturnal, it's really dark, and it's completely fitting for what kind of seems to be a night drive to his girlfriend's house, you know, going to meet her, talking about being with her, what brought him up until this point, and basically the point at which he is about to get jumped, and then it just kind of cuts.
But why is it fitting, Anthony? Talk about some of the instrumental details, Anthony. What's wrong with you, Anthony?
I believe the track Swimming Pools was the first to drop from this LP. It's a song I wasn't totally hot on at first, but it has totally grown on me. It's got kind of a synthetic vibe to it. Synthetic drums, synthetic keyboards, and there are a lot of trap-style hi-hats going on throughout the track.
There was a point around this time in you know, the Needle Drops review history where I was just saying a lot of trap flavored hi-hats, trap style hi-hats. It almost became like a meme in the comments. For Kendrick to throw out a single like this that had more of a trendy sound, at least for me at the time, did feel like, oh, okay, you know, like where is this going? But again, you know, the beauty of the chorus and hearing the narrative kind of play out within the grander scheme of the record did warm me up to the song quite a bit. Also keep in mind, like, you know, this was at a point where trap music's popularity, its growing popularity, and some of the artists that still represented it, its explosivity into the mainstream, like Waka Flocka Flame, were very much controversial. Even Kanye and Jay-Z, when they originally came out with Ham prior to the release of Watch the Throne, was a very controversial single among a lot of fans because there was a negative reaction to the more trap-influenced kind of Lex Luger direction stylistically that song went into.
It feels really smooth, kind of watery, like you could dive into it, just like the metaphorical swimming pool full of alcohol that Kendrick is rapping about, that, you know, people figuratively use to kind of douse their pain douse their sorrows, basically deal with this terrible situation surrounding them in a really unhealthy way.
There's a lot of themes of escapism on this record. And in so many ways, kind of continuing on this more negative path that Kendrick is tempted by, also comes with a note of escapism too. But, you know, in a way, he not only opts for positivity, but also, you know, reality. As well, because to continue assuming that the way things are going is viable would be a lie to himself.
What I love about this LP is, like the beats, Kendrick is very careful about placing certain people in certain places so that it works. J-Rock is in a perfect spot on this album. Dre is placed perfectly on this LP too, with the track Compton, of course. And even Drake finds himself fitting nicely into this album. I mean, stylistically, Drake and Kendrick are two very different artists, and yet Drake fits like a glove into the love song on this album.
Kendrick really kind of like nailed it in terms of that placement. You know, you really have to admire and love when an artist doesn't just have features on just to be like, yeah, this is my feature. It's a cool crossover. It's popular. It's trendy. It's nice. Or, you know, I'm similar to this artist, so we're just going to vibe together on a track. There's nothing wrong with that inherently. But, you know, when an artist sort of picks out a song and grabs a feature that is going to make them shine, that is going to play to their strengths and overall play to the strength of the song that you're crafting and creating, that helps make a special moment. And I think Kendrick was really effectively doing that. Even little moments that are still like just fucking legendary and totally essential to this record to this day, like, you know, Q with the yak, 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 yak.
I have to admit that this LP is a nice improvement hook-wise over what I heard on Section 80.
Just to kind of like put that critique in perspective a little bit, yeah, there are some pretty weak-ass choruses on Section 80, but the vast majority of the choruses on that record were, you know, and still are very good. And when I say it's sort of like a weak point for him, it's only relative because, you know, if we're looking at Kendrick like an RPG character, like all of his characteristics are nearly maxed the fuck out.
The song Real, where, you know, kind of, I'm really, really real.
Yeah, I'm still not like, you know, that's not my favorite chorus on the record to this day, but still, you know, I very much do respect the concept and just how that song plays into the storytelling of the record overall. I still think it's a, you know, a special moment on a very special record, but there you go. The vocal licks on that track do sound a little thrown together. Like I think musically something better could have fit in there. But you know, that's my one major issue with some of the writing on the LP.
And there are moments where Kendrick is singing on here in this really weird inflection. It's kind of robotic. And while it did hit me as being pretty strange at first, it really grew on me pretty heavy by my third or fourth listen to this.
And it's only grown on me more since, you know, having heard this album. And Kendrick's inflections and styles of delivery have only gotten wilder and bolder and more versatile and more out there. I mean, you know, going from here to Range Brothers is kind of night and day. Like, you know, imagine 2012 Kendrick going straight from Section 80 to Range Brothers. I don't know if everybody could fucking handle that.
I'm pretty much feeling a light to decent 9.
Okay, a couple more things. I, again, pretty much agree with the score, if not like a decent to strong 9. Maybe I'm a little hotter on the record. And it's obviously like, you know, going to go down as a total and complete fucking classic. But I wish I went more into how the narrative on the album ties up. I didn't really talk too much about like Kendrick making that final choice, that final decision to go in a positive direction and why he does that. I'm not really kind of going over the major narrative points that kind of drove the decisions in the end in terms of like his friends and the revenge part and the, you know, old woman who approaches them and the, you know, religiosity element as well. Surprised I didn't really go deeply into that. I wish I went more into the production. I wish I went more into some of the instrumental elements that made the beats unique and stand out and contrast from each other so strongly. I wish I went over the major points of the narrative and even elements of the narrative's progression that, may be true to life, maybe Kendrick's actual experience, but in terms of like how they are rolled out and displayed don't make complete sense. Like, the fact that him and his friends are so like, into this idea of getting revenge so quickly. And then, this old woman with a prayer just kind of like changes their minds instantaneously and it's done, it's over, we're saved. There's obviously like total merit to things such as spirituality and religion saving people and changing people's lives. I don't doubt that at all. But the thing is, that ending and that change happens very quickly and very, very abruptly to the point where it's like, wow, it's like, all of this, we have this whole ocean, this whole mountain of everything pushing Kendrick in this one direction. And then after all of that, like this very tiny, small surprise moment just like completely flips the script. As somebody who knows a lot of, very religious people, I understand and I have to believe that there's got to be like more depth to it than that. But yeah, obviously very positive coverage of the album that I just wish was a bit more thorough in retrospect. Let me know in the comments what you thought of my review of the review, and how has this album held up for you over the years? Are you somebody who's been listening to it since 2012, or did you come into this album more recently? What were your original thoughts on the LP, and how have they evolved over the years? Over here next to my head, it's another video you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Kendrick Lamar, Good Kid, M.A.A.d City, forever.